Hey, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about how we go from a blank desk to this setup that we have right here, connecting all the cables, connecting all of the different signal paths, and getting it to work and all the controllers to work the way that we want. Hope you get something out of it. Let's get started. I love this solution with the Launch Control XL and the Octatrack above it, because this is actually what's going to control this. The 8 channels here are going to control the 8 tracks of the Octatrack once we're done with all of this. And we're going to place the Digitakt and the Digitone right in here. And then we're going to put the PC12 right in here. And the PC12 is going to actually control the Digitakt and the Digitone. All right, so once we have the kind of physical layout the way that we want it, the next thing I like to do is connect the power supplies. The next thing, we've got 2 different signal flows. We've got an audio signal flow and a MIDI signal flow. So the first thing I like to do is the audio one, just because that's the simplest. We can just one set of stereo outs, connect them to the left and right on the Digitakt. And we're going to put those into the C and D inputs of the Octatrack. Left and right outputs from the Digitone, and that's going to go into the A and B inputs of the Octatrack. And that's all there is to it. So we've got these 2 running into the 2 inputs here, and so that way we can control the audio source through here. This is going to sum, and then it's going to go out to the main, and that's the next thing that we connect. Is we've got a stereo pair. This stereo pair, I've got these going out to my sound card, which goes into Ableton, so I can record the sound that comes out of whatever I've got going on the workbench here. But this could be a stereo out to a stereo recorder if you wanted to have like a little Zoom recorder, or if you wanted to go out to a house system if you were going to be DJing or performing live from this setup. So it's everything from this plus anything audio that's coming from inside this, so samples or effects or whatever, and then that's coming out through this stereo pair. Next up, we have the MIDI signal. Now there's a couple different parts to the MIDI signal. There's the part of these 2 controllers, which are controlling the parts of the gear that they're controlling. That's through MIDI. And then we've also got the different machines controlling each other as far as the tempo and program changes and anything like that. So we're going to start off with the controllers. So first of all, the Launch Control XL is controlling the Octatrack. And the way we do that, because this has a USB out, it needs to go through a USB MIDI host. Next thing, we're going to take a USB cable, just a regular USB cable, and that is going to go to the USB in and connect to the USB out of the Launch Control XL. So now we have this connected to here. That's where the signal stops. So then we need to continue that with regular 5-pin DIN MIDI. And so this is going to go from the MIDI out, and this will go into the Octatrack, but not directly yet. So we're going to leave that there. Next up, we have the PC12. So we've got regular DIN MIDI with this one, which is great. It doesn't have a USB out, it has a DIN MIDI out. All right, so MIDI 1 is going to go out and input into the MIDI in of the Electron. So any one of the signals that we're sending out from this controller are going to go into the Digitakt. Next up, we have a second output, which is going to go MIDI out from this, and this will go into the Digitone in just a minute. So we're going to leave this one here, just like we left the controller for the Octatrack, because we've got a couple things that we need to do. We want this controller to control both of these. So the signal has to go into both of these. But we also want the Digitakt to control the Digitone and the Octatrack. This is going to be our brain of the setup. So this output that we're going to send out from here right now. So we've got one more DIN MIDI cable here, and we're going to go from MIDI out from the Digitakt, combined with the MIDI out from the PC12, and we're going to merge those two signals using a MIDI merger. So both of those are going to go, oops, sorry, wrong way. Inputs, in and in. So we have two signals, one from here, that are both going into this and being merged together into one signal, which will then come out of one of the outputs. That's a combined signal of these two, and that's going to go into the MIDI in of the Digitone. So now we have this signal combined with this signal through this merger going into the Digitone. So this is receiving both sets of information in one cable coming in, because there's only a single input. So we need to merge those together into the input. Now you may ask, could you come into this and then go through to this? Yes, you could, but a through port is only taking the signal that's coming into the input and passing it through. So this would not receive any kind of tempo or program change from what's happening inside the Digitakt. It would only get the signal passing through from the PC12. So the only way to make both of those signals get into the Digitone is to combine them, one here, and then they go into this as a single input. So next up, we're going to do very much the same thing with the Octatrack signal as we did with the Digitone signal. So we want the Octatrack to receive a signal from the Digitakt and also from the controller, from the Launch Control XL. So this controller already has one MIDI signal. It's already gone out from the USB cable, gotten converted to a DIN MIDI, and now it's coming out here. What we need to do is we need another merger, and we're going to go in one of those inputs. So now we've got one signal coming in from that, but now we need the signal from the brain, from what's going on here. But all we really need is tempo, program change, all of that stuff, right? Which that is coming from the Digitakt, not necessarily from the Digitone. Doesn't really matter either way. So what we're going to do is we're going to come out from a MIDI through channel on the Digitone using regular 5-pin DIN MIDI. That's going to come out of the through channel. So it's taking the signal that's coming in from this one, the merged signal, and it's passing it on. We're not going to use anything from here, although we could if we wanted to, but we're not going to in this particular setup. All we're really getting out of the merged signal is stop, start, program change, tempo, all of that stuff coming from the Digitakt. So that's coming from the MIDI through, and that's going to be the other signal going into our merger box. Then the merger box needs an output, which again will be a single cable. One's coming from the MIDI controller, the other one is coming from tempo, program change, all of that stuff. And those are going to be merged, and those are going to go to the MIDI in of the Octatrack. So now we have our two signal paths completed. So we've got an audio signal coming out of the two audio sources into the Octatrack where they are merged together, and then that audio signal passes through the Octatrack, through any effects that we use or any of that stuff, and then it's going to go out this stereo pair to wherever your output is going. In this case, it's going out to a sound card and into Ableton to record, but it could be going to an outboard hardware recorder, or it could be going to a house system if you're going to be performing live. That's the complete audio system. We also have a complete MIDI system, which MIDI signal path, which is going from the PC12 into the Digitakt to control these 8 channels, control the 8 channels, the 8 tracks of the Digitakt. These 4 channels are going in through the merged with the Digitakt tempo and program change signal into the Digitone, so that these 4 tracks can control the 4 tracks of the Digitone. We've also got the signal from the Digitakt passing through. It's being used here, but then it's also passing through the Digitone and going out and being merged with the USB host that's using this controller. Those are merged together and going into the Octatrack. So now we have these 8 tracks controlling the 8 tracks of the Octatrack, these 4 controlling the 4 of the Digitone, these 8 controlling the 8 of the Digitakt. We also have our control MIDI signal, which is coming from the Digitakt, merging into the Digitone. So this can send program change, tempo, and everything to the Digitone. That same signal is passing through, going out the through port and into the Octatrack. So if you notice, as soon as I adjust the tempo on the Digitakt, go to 130, it comes to 130 here. If I go down to 125, it's 125 here. And the very same thing, if we go over to the Octatrack and we hit tempo, you'll notice it's 125 here, 125, 125. If we go up to 133, 133, 133. The Digitakt is controlling the tempo through all of the other machines. Same thing goes for start-stop program change. So if we hit play here, you'll notice that all of the other machines will play, right? So it starts everything in tempo, and if we stop it, it stops all of the machines together. So this machine is controlling the other 2 machines. So the next part that's really important about this whole setup is how we map the different things, the different control surfaces to the different machines and what we put on there. And again, totally up to you. These control surfaces are super flexible. You can set them to control whatever you like. But just to let you know the way that I have these mapped, so the Launch Control XL, this gets mapped through their app. So you plug the USB cable from the Launch Control into your computer, you load up their controller software, and you can control each one of these knobs. You can tell it what channel, what control change number that you want it to do, what CC number that you want it to do, and you just have to go into the manual for whatever machine you're going to have it control and say, okay, I want it to control, channel 1 volume with this fader. So volume is control change number 95 in the Octatrack. So you set it for this fader, channel 1, control change 95. This one, channel 2, control change 95. This one, channel 3, control change 95, and so on and so forth. And that way you have all 8 channels where each one of them controls the volume of the particular channel that it's on. So if we're on channel 1, the channel 1 slider, you'll notice that controls the level of channel 1. The other things, you can map them any way you want. The way that I have this set up in just kind of this basic setting is we've got a low pass filter, a high pass filter, and an effects send. You can make them all different. You can make them all the same, whatever you choose to do. The next thing is the PC12. This one is a little bit more complicated because it's a lot more flexible. Any knob, any button can be set up to control anything you like. So what we do on this one, for example, I have this whole bottom level set to control all of the volumes. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is track 1, 2, 3, 4 on the Digitone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is track number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on the Digitakt. So bottom row for me is volume on all of these. The buttons I have set to be mutes for each one of those channels. So if I want to mute track 1 on the Digitakt, I can mute it here or unmute it here. And I have that set up, but it's flexible. You can have that be for anything that you like. So each one of these, I would suggest to keep each one of these a track just to keep it simple. But again, you can do it any way you like. You could have these all be master effects and then each one of these be by a track, or have it only be track volume and each one of these be, I don't know, something else, whatever you like. So the way I have this set up is volume is on the bottom row. Then I have reverb send, delay send by track. Then I have the filter resonance and the filter cutoff, and then the pitch of each sample, because I like to be able to, particularly with the Digitakt, I like to be able to pitch my percussion samples based on whatever I'm doing with that particular track that I'm doing at the moment. With the Digitone, because it is a synth, you may not want to have these be just effects and filters. You may want to have these be synthesizer parameters. You may want to have this be, your levels for your different controllers of the FM synthesizer. You can set these to be anything you like. What I would suggest is certain things you're going to always use, like volume, but then everything else you can kind of set it to whatever your style is, whatever you use the most. And I would say only do one row and then leave everything else blank for the moment and play around and see what you play with the most. See what knobs, what menus you go into the most, and what functions you use the most, and say, okay, well, that's one that I don't want to have to menu dive for, so I'm going to map that to a spot on my controller. One of the beautiful things about the Electron devices, as well as a lot of other kind of modern, whether it's groove boxes or drum machines, is they have a ton of functionality. The drawback to that is you end up diving deep into a lot of menus. And when you're trying to perform live, or when you want to be spontaneous and improvise as you're recording a production, you don't want to have to dive into a menu and say, I want to go to, track 1, go to the filter, adjust the filter cutoff, then go to track 2, go to the reverb and add some reverb. You want to be able to say reverb, cutoff, do those at the same time, no matter what page you're on. And that's why you would use an external MIDI controller with any one of these devices, so that you don't have to dive into those menus. So what you'd want to do is you want to look and see which menus you dive into the most and which functions you use the most in those menus, and those are the ones that you would want to map to your controller. And I have the Digitakt going into track 1 and the Digitone going into track 2 as through tracks on the Octatrack. And so that means that track 1 is controlled here volume wise, and track 2 is controlled here volume wise. And then this is our master. We have channel 8, track 8 being used as the master. So it's set up that way in the Octatrack. So this way, with our master up, if we wanted to send the Digitakt, we could hit play. And that's everything that's coming from this instrument. We've got volume control here. That's sending the signal into here. And then we're going through track number 2, and that's controlled here. And again, we've got a high pass filter, and a low pass filter, and a reverb set. Sorry, this one's a delay send, but effect send in general on the bottom row. Then if we add in the Digitone, so again, these are the master controls for everything that's coming out of these two, but then we have individual controls by channel. So let's say that we wanted to control our pattern mutes. we've got our mute controls down here. So if we want to mute our kick, channel 1 on the Digitakt is here. So I can mute my kick there, bring it back in, or I can mute it here, whichever I choose. So if I'm doing something here, it's easier to control it there. If I'm controlling an effect parameter, it's easier to do it here. It's nice to have the flexibility to do it wherever it works best when you're actually performing live. Same thing for volumes. So if we were to take our 4 channels that we have here, we can mute them or bring them in one by one. Right? We can mute them here or bring them back in, and we've got volume controls here as well. And what's nice about this is we can control multiple volumes at the same time. Whereas if we were controlling them just on the Digitone, we would have to go into track 1, control the level. We'd have to come out of mute mode, go to track 1 to lower the level, then go to track 2, lower the level, then go to track 3 and lower the level. And we're out of mute mode. So if we had track 3 going and track 2 going and track 1 going, but we wanted to lower the volume of 2 and mute the other 2, we would have to go into mute mode to mute those 2. Whereas if we've got them like this, we could actually lower volume and mute here, lower that volume down, bring it in, fade it back up. So we have all of that control in one place without changing any of the menus. Similar control on the Digitakt. So if we are controlling these, let's bring the Digitakt up and the Digitone down. So we've got our percussion part, we've got our drum beat going here. All of these 8 tracks are controlling these 8 tracks. So we've got mutes. We can mute everything out. We can bring in individual parts. So we have all that control, plus control over individual volumes. So we can adjust our levels and then leave them exactly where they are. So we've got that control of each individual channel here without having to go channel by channel out of the mute mode, go to the track, go to the channel, change the level, go to the next track, change the level, the next track, change the level. We can just do all of those level changes here. So it's great to have these controllers to avoid the menu diving into these. It allows you to take full advantage of all of the capabilities that all of those deep menus provide without having in the middle of a performance to sit there and, stare at a little screen and go into each individual level. If you've pre-prepared what you want to control, you've got the ability to control all of that stuff while you play live. I would also add that, we've got 1 and 2 in the Digitakt that are controlling the through channels for each one of these. That frees up 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 for whatever we want them to be. Right now, I have 5 as a sample, which is kind of a background atmosphere sample. We've got the ability to have longer samples, time stretch samples, things like that on each one of those channels. We've also got the ability to turn these channels into looper tracks, which is what I also do with track 7 here. I have it so that it listens to the master, and that way, whatever is playing on the master, I can actually grab a 4-bar loop of that, have it continue playing. I can switch over to just that. So that way everything else I can adjust. I can stop, change patterns, change programs, put those through the queue into a set of headphones, get those ready. And then once they're ready, I can set the levels and I can mix back to the master on track 8, which has everything all set and it's ready for my next track, rather than just trying to change over individual programs. I don't like to do program changes that are automatic, so I switch from pattern 1 here and it changes everything, because those tend to be very dramatic and very drastic and jerk from one place to the other. So what I'd rather do is have it stay, set my next track, kind of like you would queue up your next track if you were DJing, and then crossfade into that new track that you're going to be playing. So as you just saw, the final part about this is kind of what's doing what within my setup. If you watch the video, which I will link up there, that shows exactly what I decide, or how I decide on which gear we're going to use and which things are important. It's important that each piece of gear has their role to play. So obviously, as you just saw, the Digitakt is handling everything that is drums and percussion. Digitone has 4 channels of different synths. So I like to do basses on one, arpeggiators on another, melodics on another, and then kind of dramatic things and stabs and things like that on the final channel. And then in the Octatrack, we've got 2 channels that are through channels that are handling the audio signal from these 2 pieces of gear. Then we've got 4 channels of samples and sample playback. So that could be everything from stabs or a top loop or a vocal or a melodic part, or something dramatic that we want it to sequence using the sequencer here, like a dramatic impact or a sweep effect or something like that. Then we have channel 7 that is acting as our looper that's taking the audio signal from the master track, channel 8, track 8, and recording that so that we can use that and assign it to one of the 2 sides of one of the 2 scenes on the faders, and fade back and forth between what was just recorded and our next part that we're bringing in. We've also got the crossfader and the AB effects here set to have some different effects and different effects banks. So we could set, if B is 16, we can set that to be, certain effects, a certain thing with our filter and our cutoffs and our delays, so that when we fade across to that, it's fading across to all of those different effects parameters. And then we can set A to be something different and fade back to that. The crossfader here is very flexible and it can be used for a lot of different things, which is why I kind of feel like the Octatrack is very much a Swiss Army knife for your live set. You can use it for whatever you want. You can use it as a looper, as an effects unit, as a mixer. You can use it as a fantastic sequencer. It's great for chopping up and mangling samples. You can also use it as its own kind of standalone machine where you've got different tracks that are doing different things. It doesn't have to always be connected to outside gear. So it's kind of a Swiss Army knife. That's why I like to use it as the central brain, because it allows the flexibility to connect whatever I want with it and be able to use all of those things through one piece of gear that's always kind of very familiar to operate. So I hope this was informative. At least it gave you a little bit of insight into how I set up gear, how I kind of choose which gear I'm going to set up, and how I route those different paths, the signal paths, the audio path, and the MIDI path, so that we can get something that controls what it's supposed to control, that sounds the way it's supposed to sound, and gives us kind of the output that we want for a live setup. Now, it doesn't have to be this gear, but the principles are all kind of the same. So if you love the Electron gear the same way that I do, use these machines. If not, it can be any other machine as long as it's got the same kind of inputs and outputs, or at least the inputs and outputs that fit for your workflow in your scenario. So pick the gear that works best for you, connect it the way that works best for you, and just know there's no rules. Do it the way you want, have fun with it, enjoy, be creative, make music, and that's why we do all of the stuff that we do. So thanks very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next video. Take care. Yeah.